In ordinary times, leadership often shines through metrics, strategies, and visible results. It is easy to admire a leader who drives revenue growth, expands into new markets, or achieves record-breaking milestones. Yet, those moments, though valuable, rarely reveal the essence of leadership. True leadership, the kind that defines not only organizations but history itself, emerges in times of crisis. For when storms rise and threaten to capsize the vessel, what matters most is not the size of the sails, but the steadiness of the hand at the helm. In calm waters, many appear competent. In violent seas, only a few are revealed as lighthouses. Consider this. In the quiet days of routine operations, a manager's role may feel straightforward. Plans are made, projects move forward, and success is measured by predictable outcomes. But when chaos strikes, whether through economic collapse, war, a global pandemic, or even a sudden scandal that threatens to ruin reputations, everything shifts. Certainty vanishes. The familiar playbook no longer works. Eyes turn toward the leader, desperate for reassurance, clarity, and direction. And in that moment, the leader cannot hide. Their tone of voice, the look in their eyes, the choices they make, all of it becomes amplified under the relentless spotlight of crisis. So let us pause and ask, what would you do if you found yourself in such a storm? Imagine employees panicking as rumors spread through the halls. Imagine shareholders demanding answers as the stock price plummets. Imagine families of your workers watching the news, wondering if their loved ones will lose jobs, health, or safety. Would you freeze? Would you collapse under pressure? Or would you find within yourself the composure to steady the ship? That is the true art of crisis leadership. Not the absence of fear, but the ability to stand firm despite it. And as you listen to this audiobook, I invite you to reflect on your own experiences. Perhaps you've already walked through a storm. Perhaps you're in one now. Or perhaps one waits for you in the future, unseen but inevitable. Either way, this journey is designed to give you a compass, insights from history, business, and psychology that reveal how leaders endure when everything around them crumbles. Before we dive deeper, let me gently encourage you to join in this exploration as part of a larger community. Right now, take a moment to type in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is where you are. You'll be surprised at how many fellow listeners are walking this path with you, scattered across the globe, yet united in the search for wisdom. And if you haven't yet subscribed to Audiobook Sanctuary, I invite you to do so now and turn on the notification bell. This way, you'll never miss the next journey into the timeless lessons that shape both leaders and everyday lives. Now, let us turn back to our story. History is a vast ocean filled with examples of leaders tested by crisis. Take Winston Churchill, who stepped into leadership just as Britain faced the darkest hours of World War II. His speeches did not eliminate fear, nor did they erase the threat of German invasion. But they gave the people something priceless, the conviction that they were not alone, that their struggle was not meaningless. Churchill famously declared, "We shall never surrender." Those words were more than rhetoric. They were an anchor for a nation adrift in terror. Contrast that with leaders who faltered. History remembers not only the strong, but also the weak. In moments when hesitation, denial, or dishonesty ruled, organizations and even entire nations suffered consequences that echoed for decades. A leader's failure in crisis multiplies downward, infecting the collective spirit with despair and distrust. That is why the role of a leader in crisis is so uniquely critical. It is the difference between a group collapsing into chaos or finding the resilience to endure. But what makes crisis leadership so different from leadership in ordinary times? The answer lies in psychology. Under stress, the human brain shifts into survival mode. Fight, flight, or freeze responses dominate, often leading to rash actions, panic buying, or blind obedience to misinformation. Entire groups can be swept into irrational behavior simply because fear is contagious. In this fragile state, a leader's presence is magnified. People mirror the leader's tone, absorb their confidence or their doubt, and build their actions around it. This is why crisis leadership is less about technical expertise and more about emotional stability. Think of it this way. If calm leadership is a steady fire warming the camp during peaceful nights, crisis leadership is the roaring torch carried through a dark cave, guiding everyone toward the exit. It is the same fire, but in different form, serving a different purpose. Without it, the group is left blind, stumbling, and vulnerable. The first skill we will explore in the next section is calmness, the ability to be that lighthouse in the storm. But before we arrive there, it is important to fully understand the landscape of crisis itself. Because without recognizing the forces at play, the fear, the rumors, the psychological breakdowns, you cannot hope to lead effectively. Picture the early days of the 2008 financial crisis. Banks collapsed overnight, stock markets plunged, and entire industries stood on the brink of ruin. Ordinary families woke up to headlines that threatened their savings, pensions, and homes. Leaders in government and business faced the almost impossible task of stabilizing a world that seemed to unravel by the hour. Some failed, clinging to denial or blaming others. Yet others stepped forward with calm, candid communication, acknowledging the severity of the crisis while assuring people of a plan. Those leaders, though not flawless, earned credibility that outlasted the storm. This pattern repeats itself across every kind of crisis. During natural disasters, it is not the loudest voice that brings relief, but the clearest. After terrorist attacks, it is not the show of bravado that comforts citizens, but the steady acknowledgement of grief and the promise of unity. In corporate scandals, it is not polished excuses that restore reputation, but transparent action and accountability. And so we return to the opening truth. Leadership in calm waters is about direction. Leadership in stormy seas is about survival and trust. Both matter, but one reveals a deeper truth about the leader's character. As we move forward, remember this: crisis does not create leaders, it reveals them. The storm strips away pretense, leaving only the raw reality of courage, clarity, and conviction. That is why studying crisis leadership is not simply an academic exercise. It is preparation for the moment when your own storm arrives. Because sooner or later, in life or in career, the waves will rise. In the next section, we will look closely at the psychology of crisis itself. Why does fear spread faster than fact? Why do people cling to rumors? And why do rational individuals suddenly make irrational choices when disaster looms? By understanding these dynamics, you will see more clearly why leaders must first stabilize minds before they can stabilize systems. For only when the mind is calm can the body and the organization follow. Crisis does not announce itself politely. It erupts. It tears through routines, silences plans, and floods the landscape with uncertainty. To understand how leaders must act in such moments, we must first explore the psychology of crisis itself, the way human beings respond when their sense of safety is ripped away. Without this foundation, leadership strategies risk being hollow, disconnected from the very reality they seek to address. At the heart of every crisis is fear. Fear is both primal and contagious. Imagine a crowded theater where a small spark sets off smoke. Even before flames appear, whispers begin. "Did you see that? Something's wrong." Within moments, someone shouts, "Fire!" and panic spreads faster than smoke ever could. People scramble for exits, shoving and tripping, often injuring themselves not because the fire consumed them, but because fear did. This is the nature of crisis psychology. Perception can be as dangerous as reality. Fear sharpens the senses, but it also narrows them. The human brain, under stress, shifts into survival mode, driven by the amygdala, the part responsible for fight-or-flight responses. Rational thinking, normally the product of the prefrontal cortex, takes a back seat. In this state, individuals focus on immediate threats, sometimes real, often imagined, and lose the capacity to weigh long-term consequences. That is why, in financial panics, markets crash not only from economic fundamentals, but from human behavior. People sell assets out of terror, amplifying the very collapse they fear. Rumors become fuel for this fire. In the age of social media, whispers transform into tidal waves within minutes. During the 2020 pandemic, false cures, exaggerated death tolls, and conspiracy theories spread across the globe at lightning speed. In many ways, the infodemic was as destructive as the virus itself, creating distrust in leaders, division among citizens, and chaos in decision-making. Leaders who underestimated the power of misinformation found themselves constantly reactive, forever one step behind the storm of rumors. The psychology of crisis also reveals a deep hunger for direction. When people feel lost, they look for someone, anyone, to provide clarity. History is full of examples where demagogues exploited this hunger, twisting fear into obedience. But it also offers stories of authentic leaders who rose to meet the moment, calming the noise with truth and vision. The difference between exploitation and inspiration often lies in intent. One seeks power, the other seeks stability and trust. Let us turn to a vivid example. After the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, the United States was a nation in shock. Images of collapsing towers looped endlessly on television screens. People feared leaving their homes, traveling, or even gathering in public spaces. The country's psyche was fractured. In that moment, President George W. Bush addressed the nation. Agree or disagree with his policies that followed, one cannot deny the psychological significance of his speech from the Oval Office. Our way of life, our very freedom, came under attack. But they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. Those words did not erase grief, but they gave people a framework. Fear would not have the final word. The leader's voice became a container for collective emotion. This is why leaders must first grasp the psychology of crisis. They are not merely solving logistical problems. They are shepherding hearts and minds through disorientation. When people lose their inner compass, the leader becomes the compass. Without this awareness, even the best strategies falter. Another dimension of crisis psychology is loss of trust. When institutions falter, when news contradicts itself, when one authority says all is safe and another says prepare for disaster, people retreat into skepticism. In this vacuum, they cling to whatever feels certain, whether it is a rumor, a false prophet, or a charismatic figure who promises simple answers. Leaders who wish to navigate crises must therefore protect credibility as if it were oxygen. Once lost, it is nearly impossible to restore. In corporate contexts, this is equally true. Think of Johnson & Johnson in 1982, when 7 people died after taking Tylenol capsules laced with cyanide. The nation panicked. trust in the company plummeted. Yet the leadership's response, immediately recalling 31 million bottles, halting production, and introducing tamper-proof packaging, became a textbook case of crisis management. Why? Because their actions aligned with human psychology. They acknowledged fear, acted visibly to restore safety, and communicated transparently. In contrast, companies that deny or minimize threats in the early stages often find themselves permanently scarred in the public eye. Fear also reshapes time perception. Hours can feel like days. Delays in communication, even short ones, are interpreted as indifference or incompetence. This is why leaders must move quickly, not always to provide answers, but to provide presence. Silence is dangerous in crisis. A leader who waits for perfect information before speaking risks losing the confidence of those who can no longer bear uncertainty. Even saying, "We don't have all the facts, but here's what we know right now, and here's what we're doing," can calm frayed nerves. The psychology of crisis is also deeply collective. Unlike personal stress, where an individual may withdraw and cope privately, public crises magnify and multiply emotions. A single fearful thought becomes an echo chamber when repeated by hundreds, then thousands. This collective fear creates what sociologists call social contagion. One person's panic purchase of food supplies leads to empty shelves, which validates others' fear, prompting further panic buying. Leaders must therefore recognize that their words and actions ripple outward exponentially. To illustrate, consider Franklin D. Roosevelt during the Great Depression. When banks began collapsing in the early 1930s, fear spiraled into mass withdrawals. People lined up, demanding their savings in cash, accelerating the financial collapse. Roosevelt, in his first inaugural address, delivered the now immortal line, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." While economic policies followed, it was this psychological insight, naming fear as the enemy, that began to restore trust. He understood that the real battle was not just against failing banks, but against failing confidence. This truth brings us to the heart of crisis leadership. Before leaders can stabilize systems, they must stabilize psychology. If the mind is captured by fear, no policy, no plan, no resource allocation can succeed. The leader's role is therefore twofold: manage reality and manage perception. Both are equally real, equally consequential. But stabilizing psychology is not about denying fear. Leaders who say, "There is nothing to worry about," when clearly danger is visible, only deepen mistrust. The art is in acknowledging the storm while pointing to a way through it. This is why metaphors, lighthouses, fires, storms, are so powerful in leadership language. They give people a way to frame their experience, to understand chaos not as meaningless, but as a challenge that can be navigated. As we move forward in this audiobook, remember that crisis psychology is not an obstacle to overcome, but a landscape to navigate. Just as sailors must understand winds and tides before steering a ship, leaders must understand fear, rumor, and collective emotion before guiding people. Crisis is not just external, it is internal. It lives in the beating hearts of those who look to their leader. And this leads us naturally to the next essential lesson: calmness. If fear spreads like fire, then calm spreads like water. A leader who can embody calm becomes the lighthouse on the shore, a visible presence that steadies all who see it. In the next section, we will explore this art of calm, the first and most vital skill of crisis leadership, and why it is often the difference between collapse and survival. Crisis is a storm, and in every storm, people search the horizon for something steady, something unshaken. That is why calmness is the first and most vital skill of crisis leadership. To be calm does not mean to be indifferent, nor does it mean to deny the weight of the moment. It means to stand in the center of chaos with a presence that reassures others. Yes, this is frightening, but we will endure. Calmness is not simply an inner state. It is a beacon, a lighthouse whose light reaches far beyond the self and steadies all who see it. Imagine a ship at sea, battered by waves. The crew rushes from one end to the other, voices rising, fear mounting. If the captain joins the panic, running, shouting, or freezing, the crew disintegrates into chaos. But if the captain remains steady, voice clear, steps deliberate, eyes fixed on the horizon, the crew finds courage in his composure. His calm does not remove the storm, but it redefines it. The storm is no longer the master, the leader's presence is. History offers powerful examples of this principle. Take Abraham Lincoln in the midst of the American Civil War. The nation was tearing itself apart. Death tolls climbed higher with every battle. Pressure mounted on all sides for him to yield, to abandon the dream of unity. Yet Lincoln carried a calm dignity, often expressed through his patient storytelling and quiet humor. Visitors to the White House recorded how, even in the gravest moments, Lincoln spoke softly, listened intently, and maintained a gentleness that steadied those around him. His calm was not weakness. It was the strength that held a fractured country together. In business, too, calm leadership has saved companies from collapse. Consider Howard Schultz, returning to Starbucks in 2008 as the company faced plummeting stock prices and declining customer trust. Instead of panic, he projected composure. He calmly closed over 7,000 stores for one day to retrain baristas, a symbolic act that reassured employees and customers alike that the company was refocusing on quality. His calm confidence cascaded through the organization, helping Starbucks recover and thrive again. Why is calmness so powerful? Because fear is contagious, but so is calm. Neuroscience tells us that human beings mirror the emotions of those around them through what are known as mirror neurons. When a leader breathes steadily, speaks clearly, and radiates composed energy, the nervous systems of others subconsciously align. Teams slow their breathing, lower their voices, and regain clarity. Calmness spreads invisibly, just as panic does, but with healing effect. Calmness also buys time. In crisis, every second feels like an eternity. The temptation is to rush, to react, to do something, anything, to feel in control. But haste often leads to mistakes. Calm leaders create psychological space, allowing room for clearer thinking. Think of Captain Chesley "Sully" Sullenberger, who landed U.S. Airways Flight 1549 on the Hudson River after both engines failed. In those terrifying minutes, his voice on the cockpit recorder remained composed, almost casual, as he coordinated with air traffic control and his co-pilot. His calmness enabled flawless execution, saving all 155 lives aboard. But calmness is not automatic. It must be cultivated. Leaders who wish to embody calm in crisis must train long before the storm arrives. Practices like mindfulness, breathing techniques, or even simple habits of pausing before responding are invaluable. A leader who cannot master their own heartbeat cannot hope to steady the heartbeat of a team. Calmness is not the absence of anxiety, it is the mastery of it. Yet calmness alone is not enough. Without communication, calmness can be misread as apathy. Imagine a leader standing still, composed but silent while panic spreads. Employees may interpret that silence as ignorance or indifference. That is why calmness must flow outward into words and actions. It must be visible. The leader must speak, must reassure, must provide direction. Otherwise, calm remains trapped inside, unable to influence others. A story from World War II illustrates this well. During the Blitz in London, when German bombs rained nightly upon the city, Prime Minister Winston Churchill did not hide in bunkers. He walked the streets, visiting neighborhoods reduced to rubble, speaking directly with citizens. His calm presence among the people transformed fear into resilience. Londoners began repeating the phrase, "Keep calm and carry on," not as propaganda, but as lived reality. Churchill's calm, embodied in both presence and speech, became a national shield. In your own life, think of the leaders you trust most. Are they the ones who shout and panic when challenges arise? Or are they the ones who breathe, who listen, who project a quiet strength? Calmness builds credibility. It says, without words, "I can be trusted because I will not collapse when you need me most." But calmness is not passive. It requires discipline, courage, and the willingness to absorb pressure without transmitting it. A calm leader is like a dam that absorbs the rushing force of a river, preventing floodwaters from destroying the land downstream. They feel the weight, but they hold it, transforming chaos into stability for others. As we continue this journey, remember, calmness is the lighthouse. But what is a lighthouse without light? The next essential skill of crisis leadership is communication, clear, transparent, and unwavering. For calm steadies the heart, but communication guides the mind. Without it, calmness risks being invisible. With it, calmness becomes contagious clarity. If calmness is the lighthouse itself, then communication is the light that beams outward, piercing through fog and storm. A lighthouse without light may stand firm, but it does not guide. In the same way, a leader who remains calm but fails to communicate leaves people adrift, searching for direction and clarity. In crisis, silence is not neutral. It is destructive. Silence invites speculation, fuels rumors, and leaves fear to invent its own narrative. Words, when chosen wisely, can be as life-saving as actions. Think of Franklin D. Roosevelt's fireside chats during the Great Depression. In those broadcasts, he spoke directly to the American people as if he were sitting in their living rooms, explaining complex economic measures in plain, steady language. His calm voice combined with transparent words restored faith in institutions at a time when banks were collapsing and bread lines stretched for miles. Roosevelt did not hide the severity of the crisis. He explained it. He told people what was being done and why. In doing so, he gave them something stronger than certainty. He gave them trust. Communication in crisis requires two elements above all else: clarity and transparency. Clarity means stripping away jargon, ambiguity, and evasiveness. When danger is real, people cannot bear vague reassurances like, "Everything will be fine." They need concrete information. What happened? What does it mean for us? What steps are being taken? Transparency, meanwhile, is the willingness to admit what is not yet known. Leaders often fear saying, "I don't know." But in reality, honesty about uncertainty is far more trustworthy than false confidence. A leader who says, "Here's what we know, here's what we don't, and here's what we are doing next," builds credibility even in the foggiest of storms. Corporate history provides vivid lessons on the consequences of poor communication. During the 2010 Deepwater Horizon oil spill, BP's then CEO Tony Hayward famously remarked, "I'd like my life back." The comment, made while oil poured into the Gulf of Mexico and workers had died, was seen as cold, detached, and self-centered. No amount of technical recovery work could erase the damage those words inflicted on BP's reputation. The lesson is clear. In crisis, every word from a leader carries amplified weight, shaping public perception far beyond the immediate facts. Contrast this with how New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern responded after the 2019 Christchurch mosque shootings. Within hours, she appeared before the public, speaking with compassion, sorrow, and unity. She wore a black headscarf in solidarity with the Muslim community, and her words acknowledged grief while also committing to action. Tighter gun laws, stronger community protection, unwavering support for victims' families. Her communication was both transparent and deeply human. The result was not just trust in her leadership, but a profound sense of national solidarity. This reveals another truth. Communication in crisis is not merely about facts, it is about tone. A leader's voice must carry steadiness, empathy, and conviction. Facts answer questions, but tone addresses emotions. Both are necessary. Imagine a doctor delivering a diagnosis. If they share accurate information, but do so coldly, the patient feels abandoned. If they speak warmly but obscure the truth, the patient feels deceived. Only when honesty and empathy walk hand in hand can trust survive. Leaders must also recognize the importance of repetition. In crisis, people often hear through the filter of fear. Information may be distorted, forgotten, or overshadowed by rumors. A single announcement is rarely enough. Consistency matters. Repeating key messages across different platforms, meetings, emails, press releases, social media, ensures clarity takes root. Repetition does not insult intelligence. It reinforces stability. But clarity does not mean oversimplification. Leaders must respect their audience's intelligence while avoiding unnecessary complexity. Think of Captain Sully Sullenberger after the Hudson River landing. His brief announcements to passengers, "This is the captain. Brace for impact," were concise, unambiguous, and effective. No one could misunderstand. Yet after the landing, his calm explanations provided the fuller story, showing both honesty and competence. Effective crisis communication also requires visibility. People need to see and hear their leader. Hidden leadership breeds suspicion. During Hurricane Katrina, the delayed and muddled response of U.S. authorities was made worse by leaders who seemed absent in the critical first days. Citizens, desperate for guidance, filled the silence with anger and despair. In contrast, when leaders show up, whether walking the factory floor after a disaster, addressing the nation on live television, or sending daily updates to employees, they remind people that they are not abandoned. Transparency has another dimension: admitting mistakes. Leaders are human, and in the fog of crisis, errors will be made. Pretending otherwise only deepens mistrust. When Johnson & Johnson faced the Tylenol poisoning crisis, executives admitted the scope of the danger openly, pulled products from shelves, and absorbed short-term financial losses. Their transparency rebuilt trust so powerfully that Tylenol returned to being one of the most trusted brands. By contrast, when Volkswagen's emissions scandal broke years later, the company's initial denials and half-truths multiplied the damage. It was not just the violation that angered people, it was the deception. As you reflect on these examples, consider how communication is not simply a tool for crisis management, but a moral duty. To lead is to hold people's trust in your hands. Words can heal or harm, unite or divide, restore or destroy. In the digital age, where every sentence may be replayed, shared, and scrutinized, this responsibility is heavier than ever. Calmness steadies the heart. Communication steadies the mind. Together, They form the foundation of crisis leadership. But a leader cannot remain in words alone. Eventually, action must follow. And in a crisis, action means decision, not endless deliberation, not paralyzing doubt, but decisive steps taken at the right time with the right reasoning. That is where we turn next. The art of making decisions swiftly, yet grounded in logic, even as the storm rages. Calmness steadies the heart. Communication steadies the mind. But leadership cannot remain only in presence and words. Eventually, a moment comes when the leader must choose a course of action. In crisis, that choice often determines survival or collapse. And so, decisiveness, swift yet grounded in logic, is the third essential skill of crisis leadership. Decisiveness in ordinary times is a luxury. Leaders can consult teams, analyze reports, wait for data, and weigh multiple scenarios before committing. But in crisis, time contracts, seconds matter. Delayed action can transform a small spark into an uncontrollable fire. Yet rushing blindly is just as dangerous. The art lies in acting quickly without abandoning reason. Consider Dwight D. Eisenhower on the eve of D-Day in 1944. Allied forces had prepared for years to liberate Europe from Nazi control. But the decision to launch the invasion depended on weather conditions. Storms churned in the English Channel, threatening disaster if troops attempted to land. Eisenhower listened to his meteorologists, debated with his generals, and agonized over the risks. Finally, he decided to move forward. His words were simple. "Okay, let's go." That decision, though uncertain and perilous, changed the course of history. Eisenhower acted swiftly, but not recklessly. His decisiveness was grounded in the best information available at the time. In business, we see the same principle. During the 1982 Tylenol poisoning crisis, Johnson & Johnson faced immense pressure. Should they recall products nationwide at enormous cost, or contain the recall to specific regions? Within hours, they chose the bolder path, a full recall of 31 million bottles. It was a staggering financial hit, but it preserved the company's reputation and customer trust. Delay or hesitation might have destroyed the brand forever. Decisiveness saved not just Tylenol, but the entire company. But why is decisiveness so difficult in crisis? Because fear magnifies uncertainty. Leaders crave perfect information, but crises rarely provide it. Waiting for clarity often means waiting too long. The key, then, is not perfect decisions, but sound ones. Decisions based on available evidence, guided by principles, and executed with commitment. A helpful metaphor is a chess game under a timer. The clock ticks relentlessly. You cannot examine every possibility, but you must still choose. Strong players rely on principles. Control the center, protect the king, develop your pieces. Similarly, strong leaders rely on guiding values. When time is short, values become the compass. One example of failure illustrates this painfully. During the early days of Hurricane Katrina in 2005, confusion paralyzed government response. Leaders debated jurisdiction, resources, and responsibility, while citizens stranded on rooftops begged for rescue. Indecision cost lives. The lesson is stark. Hesitation in crisis is not neutral. It is deadly. So how can leaders cultivate decisive strength? First, by preparing in advance. Military leaders drill scenarios endlessly so that when crisis strikes, action is reflexive. Business leaders who run simulations or war games do the same, training teams to think through supply chain collapses, cybersecurity breaches, or market crashes. Preparation reduces hesitation. Second, by embracing imperfect action. A flawed decision, made quickly and adjusted later, is often better than paralysis. Leaders must learn to course-correct rather than delay endlessly. A ship changing course by a few degrees early avoids an iceberg. A ship that waits too long crashes. Third, by owning responsibility. Decisive leaders accept the weight of their choices. Eisenhower, before D-Day, drafted 2 letters, one celebrating victory, the other accepting full responsibility for failure. That willingness to bear the consequences gave him the moral strength to decide. Decisiveness is also deeply tied to communication. Once a decision is made, it must be communicated clearly and confidently. Doubt in the leader's voice becomes doubt in the group's heart. Even if the path is uncertain, commitment to the path gives people the courage to follow. But decisiveness does not mean ignoring others. Wise leaders seek input quickly, listening to advisors before committing. They balance consultation with action. Too much consultation, and paralysis sets in. Too little, and reckless mistakes follow. The balance is delicate but essential. In our own time, the COVID-19 pandemic revealed the cost of indecision. Some leaders delayed lockdowns, delayed public warnings, delayed distribution of protective equipment, all in hopes of more certainty. Yet each delay multiplied infections, overwhelming hospitals. Others acted swiftly, closing borders, mandating masks, and communicating decisions firmly. While no response was perfect, those who acted decisively saved countless lives. At the personal level, decisiveness also shapes how teams view their leader. Imagine working under a manager who cannot choose, who waffles between options, who fears making the wrong call. Frustration grows, morale collapses, and the team feels abandoned. In contrast, a leader who decides, "We will take this course, and here is why," gives people a sense of stability, even if the outcome is not guaranteed. And yet, decisiveness must always remain grounded in logic, not impulse. Impulsive leaders mistake movement for progress. They rush decisions to appear strong, but without logic, their choices collapse under scrutiny. True crisis leadership demands both speed and reason. Think of the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. When U.S. intelligence revealed Soviet missiles in Cuba, President John F. Kennedy faced enormous pressure to strike immediately. Hawks in his administration urged airstrikes and invasion, but Kennedy paused just long enough to weigh alternatives. He chose a naval blockade, a decisive action, yet not reckless. That measured decision avoided nuclear war. It was the perfect illustration of decisiveness with grounded logic. As you reflect on this, ask yourself, when faced with crisis, do you tend to freeze, overanalyze, or rush headlong? True leaders cultivate a discipline of timely, thoughtful action. They do not wait for perfect clarity, nor do they leap without thought. They balance urgency with wisdom, speed with principle. This balance leads us naturally to the next skill. For decisions, however swift and sound, must also reflect a deeper truth. People matter more than profit, more than short-term gain. In the next section, we will explore why prioritizing human lives and dignity is not only moral but strategic, and why every great leader in crisis has discovered this unshakable principle. A leader may remain calm, a leader may speak with clarity, a leader may act decisively. But if those actions neglect the human beings they serve, the leadership collapses. Crises do not just test strategy, they test values. The fourth essential skill of crisis leadership is the ability to place people before profit. Human dignity before short-term advantage. In the storm, numbers may fall, revenues may shrink, and systems may break. But what endures is trust, the conviction among people that their leader will not abandon them. History remembers leaders who chose humanity over expedience. During the Great Depression, when breadlines stretched for miles and families starved, Eleanor Roosevelt, though not an elected leader, became the compassionate voice of the White House. She visited impoverished neighborhoods, sat with families in destitution, and lobbied relentlessly for relief programs. Her advocacy reminded the American people that their suffering was not invisible. Leadership in crisis is not always about commanding armies or corporations. It is often about looking into the eyes of those in pain and refusing to look away. In business, this principle shines through the stories of companies that weathered crises by valuing employees above immediate profit. Consider the tale of Southwest Airlines after the September 11th attacks. Air travel collapsed, revenue plummeted, and many airlines laid off thousands of workers to protect their bottom lines. But Southwest chose another path. They retained their employees, accepting short-term financial pain for long-term loyalty. The result? Morale soared, customers noticed. And when the industry recovered, Southwest rebounded stronger than competitors who had sacrificed people to save numbers. Contrast this with companies that chose the opposite. During financial downturns, some corporations treated workers as disposable, slashing jobs and benefits while protecting executive bonuses. The immediate balance sheets improved, but reputations withered. Customers turned away, employees disengaged, and recovery faltered. Profit-first leadership may look efficient in the moment, but it rots the foundation of trust. Why does prioritizing people matter so deeply in crisis? Because human beings are not simply cogs in a machine. They are the machine. Organizations are living systems made of hearts, minds, and relationships. When people feel disposable, they disengage or revolt. But when they feel protected, they will sacrifice, innovate, and endure. Leaders who honor people first unlock resilience that money cannot buy. Let us look at a more recent example. In 2020, as COVID-19 swept across the globe, companies faced excruciating choices. Some furloughed or terminated vast numbers of employees. Others, like Microsoft under Satya Nadella, declared they would continue paying hourly workers even when offices closed. This choice cost money in the short run, but it sent a powerful message. We value you not just for your productivity, but for who you are. That message built loyalty that outlasted the crisis. Placing people first does not mean ignoring finances. It means recognizing that finances exist to serve people, not the other way around. Leaders must still make hard choices, cutting budgets, restructuring teams, shifting priorities. But how those choices are made and communicated reveals the leader's heart. Do they slash indiscriminately, or do they protect the vulnerable? Do they hide behind numbers, or do they face their people with honesty and compassion? In war, this principle often separates tyrants from heroes. During World War II, General Dwight Eisenhower wrote personal letters to families of fallen soldiers, acknowledging their sacrifice with humility. He did not treat soldiers as statistics. He treated them as sons, husbands, fathers, human beings whose loss mattered. Contrast this with dictators who throw lives into battle with no regard, viewing people as expendable fuel for their ambitions. History judges them harshly. The metaphor of people before profit can also be seen as roots before branches. In a storm, branches may break, leaves may fall, but if roots are protected, the tree survives. Employees, citizens, and communities are the roots. Profits are the branches. A wise leader ensures the roots are nourished, even if some branches must be sacrificed. There is also a spiritual dimension here. In moments of crisis, people seek not only safety, but meaning. They want to believe that their suffering matters, that their leader sees them as more than numbers on a chart. Leaders who honor this need become more than managers. They become moral anchors. They remind people that human life has inherent worth, even in the harshest of storms. But let us be honest, prioritizing people can be costly. Leaders may face criticism from investors, pressure from boards, or doubts from peers. Yet time and again, the long arc of history vindicates those who choose humanity. After the 2008 financial collapse, leaders who slashed recklessly often lost their organizations altogether, while those who safeguarded their teams emerged with loyalty that no bailout could purchase. This principle also reshapes decision-making. When facing two imperfect options, a leader guided by humanity asks, which path preserves dignity? Which path protects lives? Which path builds trust, even at a price? Such questions may not maximize short-term profit, but they maximize long-term survival. As we move toward the final skill of crisis leadership, consider this. Calmness steadies the heart. Communication steadies the mind. Decisiveness sets direction, and prioritizing people protects the soul of the community. But one more element remains, the glue that holds everything together: trust and unity. For even the calmest, clearest, most decisive, and most compassionate leader cannot lead alone. In the next section, we will explore how trust is built and unity is forged in the crucible of crisis, and why these are the true legacies of great leadership. When storms rage, calm steadies the heart, communication steadies the mind, decisiveness sets the course, and compassion protects the soul of the people. But there is one final element that transforms survival into legacy: trust and unity. A leader in crisis is not merely guiding a ship, they are binding together its crew, reminding each person that the vessel will not be navigated by one alone, but by all, moving as one. Trust and unity are not optional virtues. They are the very fabric of leadership under fire. Trust begins with consistency. People must know that what a leader says aligns with what they do. Empty words shatter trust faster than failure itself. Consider the Watergate scandal. President Richard Nixon's denials, followed by revelations of deception, destroyed not only his presidency, but public confidence in government for years. The lesson is clear. In crisis, dishonesty is poison. Leaders who sacrifice truth for convenience may gain a day, but they lose an era. By contrast, think of Václav Havel, the Czech dissident who later became president. During the Velvet Revolution, he spoke with remarkable candor about the nation's struggles, admitting uncertainties and setbacks. His authenticity earned trust so deep that people followed him into uncharted territory, believing not that he had all the answers, but that he would never betray their faith. That trust forged a peaceful transition of power in a time when violence seemed inevitable. Unity, meanwhile, arises when leaders emphasize we over I. In crisis, the temptation is to posture as the sole savior. I will fix this. I alone can deliver you. But true leaders dissolve ego into community. They remind people of shared identity, shared sacrifice, and shared destiny. During World War II, Winston Churchill's speeches consistently invoked the collective. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall never surrender. He was not promising victory alone. He was calling an entire nation into unity. The psychology of unity is simple yet profound. Human beings draw courage from belonging. Alone, fear overwhelms. Together, fear weakens. A leader who fosters unity transforms individuals into a force greater than themselves. This is why rituals, symbols, and shared language matter in crisis. They weave individuals into a tapestry of collective strength. Business history echoes the same principle. After the 1982 Tylenol tragedy, Johnson & Johnson not only acted decisively, but involved their entire workforce in the recovery. Executives, managers, and factory workers alike became ambassadors of safety and trust. The message was clear: we are in this together. That unity not only restored the brand, but made it stronger. But unity is fragile. It can fracture under pressure if leaders fail to nurture it. When employees see favoritism, when citizens see inequity, when promises are broken, divisions widen. A divided organization or nation is vulnerable. Crisis preys on fragmentation. Leaders must therefore act as bridges, closing gaps, healing wounds, and reminding people of their common bond. Trust and unity also demand vulnerability. Leaders who admit their humanity, who say, "I don't know everything, but I will not abandon you," are far more trustworthy than those who pretend to be invincible. Vulnerability does not weaken authority, it humanizes it. It signals to followers that the leader is part of the community, not above it. Think of Nelson Mandela emerging from 27 years in prison to lead South Africa. He could have chosen vengeance, but instead he chose reconciliation. His willingness to forgive, to share power, and to speak to all races with honesty built a fragile yet real unity in a nation long fractured by apartheid. His legacy is not merely political freedom, but the demonstration that unity can be forged, even in the most divided of circumstances. Trust and unity also ripple outward. When a leader builds them within an organization, customers, partners, and communities feel it too. In times of economic crisis, companies that demonstrate internal solidarity often inspire external confidence. People invest not only in products, but in cultures of trust. And so, as we come to the close of this journey, we return to the central truth. Crisis does not create leaders, it reveals them. It reveals whether calm steadiness lives beneath pressure. It reveals whether communication is clear or clouded. It reveals whether decisiveness is guided by principle or impulse. It reveals whether people matter more than profit. And ultimately, it reveals whether trust and unity can be forged in the fire of uncertainty. Let us end with this final reflection. Leadership in crisis is not about saying, "I have all the answers." It is about standing before your people and declaring, "We will face this together." It is not about erasing fear, but about proving that fear will not define the future. It is not about perfection, but about presence. Being there, guiding, holding, and enduring alongside those who look to you for hope. In the end, legacy is not built on strategies, profits, or titles. Legacy is built on the trust you inspire and the unity you create. That is the mark of true leadership in crisis. The storms of life, whether economic, political, personal, or global, are not rare. They are inevitable. Each of us, in some way, will face moments when the world seems to collapse around us. The question is not whether the storm will come, but how we will stand within it. Leadership in crisis is not a distant concept reserved for presidents, generals, or CEOs. It is a calling that may fall upon any of us. A parent guiding a family through hardship, a teacher calming children in moments of chaos, a manager steering a small team through unexpected loss. The principles remain the same. Calmness steadies the heart. Communication steadies the mind. Decisiveness sets direction. Compassion protects dignity. Trust and unity hold everything together. And the greatest of these is unity. For no leader, no matter how strong, can overcome crisis alone. Survival, recovery, and growth come from a collective spirit. The leader's role is to ignite that spirit, to remind people that togetherness multiplies courage. Imagine again the storm at sea. The waves tower, the winds howl, the ship creaks under strain. Alone, one sailor cannot keep the vessel afloat. But with every hand on deck, with every voice encouraged, with every heart beating in unison, the storm becomes survivable. The leader does not promise calm seas. They promise that no one will be left behind as long as unity holds. That is why the final image we carry is this. In the midst of the storm, the leader stands and says, "I will not leave you. We will row together, we will steer together, and we will reach the shore together." Those words may not still the waves, but they transform fear into resolve. They turn chaos into cohesion. They shape legacies that endure long after the storm has passed. So let us not fear crisis. Let us prepare for it, embrace its lessons, and recognize it for what it truly is, the great revealer of character. For in crisis, the masks fall away, and the truth of leadership shines clear. And if we are willing to learn, to embody calmness, clarity, courage, compassion, trust, and unity, then we too can become the lighthouses in the storm, guiding others not by claiming to know everything, but by promising to walk beside them until dawn breaks. May this truth stay with you long after these words fade. Crisis is not only a test, but an invitation to rise, to lead, and to show the world that even in the darkest hour, light can be found.